My wife and I have shared over 2 decades of marriage, building a life filled with love, growth, and countless cherished memories. At 43, I am proud of the family we've nurtured together. And now 40 remains the vibrant heart of our home. Our 2 teenagers, Darcy, a brilliant and spirited 16-year-old, and John, our inquisitive and creative 14-year-old, are the cornerstones of our happiness. When Anne and I exchanged vows, I had just earned my degree, and she was completing her final semester. Today, I serve as an engineering manager for a mid-sized corporation, while Anne has established herself as an adept paralegal at a reputable law firm. We balance our demanding careers by prioritizing time for family and shared interests. Together, we enjoy an active lifestyle, regular gym visits, and frequent outdoor adventures, particularly hiking when the weather allows. Our marriage has been a journey of shared triumphs and challenges. Though I wouldn't describe myself as a romantic, I take pride in keeping Anne happy. The physical intimacy we share remains a source of connection and joy, a sustaining force even after 20 years. Anne's beauty, both inner and outer, continues to turn heads, especially when she dresses up for an evening out. Our children bring us immense pride. Both excel academically, maintain strong friendships, and are well regarded by their peers. I've always been actively involved in their lives, helping with homework, cheering at their games, and planning family adventures. Being a present and supportive father has always been one of my core beliefs. Professionally, my role as an engineering manager grants me flexibility to enjoy family time and avoid late nights. Anne's job occasionally requires overtime during intense cases, but these moments are rare. For years, our life felt steady and deeply satisfying. Yet, as I would later learn, undercurrents of discord were beginning to stir. Enter Rick Walker, a confident and assertive attorney recently hired at Anne's firm. Rick exuded self-assurance with a sculpted physique and a brash personality that drew attention effortlessly. I first encountered him at one of Anne's office events. Throughout the evening, he flirted openly with her, which unsettled me. When I voiced my concerns afterward and dismissed them, brushing off his behavior as harmless. Despite my unease, I chose to trust her, and life returned to normal, at least on the surface. For 6 months, everything seemed fine until Anne became engrossed in a high-stakes case that demanded more of her time. Though her work hours increased, she remained attentive, checking in every evening. I had no reason to doubt her sincerity. Unbeknownst to me, however, her interactions with Rick had deepened into something more than casual banter. When the case concluded, Anne's firm organized a celebratory weekend retreat at a senior partner's lakeside cabin. We had visited the cabin before, and I looked forward to the familiar tranquility. With Darcy and John mature enough to manage on their own, and I departed for what I hoped would be a rejuvenating escape. The first evening unfolded smoothly, but Rick's persistent attention to Anne was impossible to ignore. I refrained from confronting him, unwilling to cause a scene. Around the fire pit, I observed their interactions from the corner of my eye. As my irritation grew, I resolved to address it later, not wanting to mar the evening for everyone. The next morning, I rose early to the aroma of fresh coffee and joined the hosts in the kitchen to help with breakfast. When the group gathered, I noticed Rick had taken the seat beside Anne my seat. When I asked him to move, he casually suggested I find another chair. His audacity stunned me, but I relented, unwilling to escalate the situation. Throughout the day, Anne seemed tethered to Rick's side. During the hike at the lake, even in casual conversation, each attempt I made to reconnect with her was met with a dismissive laugh or a light-hearted excuse. By evening, my patience was stretched thin. Determined to reclaim my place, I seated myself beside Anne before Rick could. The tension was palpable, casting a shadow over the gathering. Frustrated, I excused myself and retreated to our room. As I began packing for an early departure, Anne entered the room, her expression both flushed and hesitant. She asked to talk, and though her timing felt almost comical, I agreed. What followed shattered me, and confessed to feeling an undeniable sexual tension with Rick. Though she assured me she hadn't been unfaithful, and claimed she had no intention of betraying me, her next words cut deep. "Michael, I need to be honest with you. Tonight, I'm going to spend the night with him. I wanted to tell you beforehand, so it wouldn't feel like a betrayal. There's no sneaking around here. I'm not that kind of person. This is just something I need to do for clarity. Tomorrow I'll be fully committed to us again. Her words felt like a dagger to the heart. 20 years of marriage, love, and trust unraveled in an instant. I struggled to comprehend how she could justify this as anything less than a profound betrayal. If you love me, you'll understand, she continued. I stood firm, my voice steady but resolute. If you loved me, and you wouldn't even contemplate this. Loyalty was always non-negotiable for us. This choice will have consequences. And unwavering in her decision simply said, we'll talk tomorrow, and walked out. As the door closed, a cold finality settled over me. I poured my drink down the sink, realizing I needed no external courage for what lay ahead. I packed my belongings, leaving hers untouched. Turning out the lights, I sat on the bed, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. Around 2 a.m., I quietly slipped out of the cabin, my suitcase in hand. The night air was crisp, the world around me silent. I started the car and began the long drive home, my mind racing with disbelief and heartbreak. When I arrived, the house lights were still on. One of the kids was awake. I took a deep breath before stepping inside, knowing that the life I returned to would never be the same. I grabbed my suitcase and stepped inside the house, finding both Darcy and John on the couch, engrossed in a movie. Darcy was the first to notice me. Dad, what are you doing here? I thought you weren't coming home until tomorrow, she asked, confusion flickering in her eyes. John glanced over, equally puzzled. Yeah, where's Mom? I exhaled deeply, steadying myself. Your mom is still at the cabin, I said evenly. She's spending the night with someone else. It was blunt, brutally so, but I saw no point in sugarcoating the truth. They deserved honesty, however painful it might be. Could I have softened the blow? Perhaps. But in that moment, I wasn't concerned about delicacy. What do you mean? Darcy's voice sharpened, her brow furrowing. She's cheating on you? That's exactly what I mean, I replied. She told me she was going to be with someone tonight. I didn't stay to watch it happen. I packed my things and came home, leaving her to figure out how to get back on her own. The room fell silent as they processed my words. Finally, Darcy spoke again, her voice filled with anger and disbelief. How could she do that? We talked for a while, their initial shock giving way to shared frustration and hurt. Eventually, I carried my suitcase upstairs to the spare room. That night, I began the process of moving my belongings from the bedroom and I had shared for over 20 years into what would now be my personal sanctuary. The guest room was modest but comfortable, with its own bathroom and a decent bed. Exhausted, I collapsed onto it and drifted into a restless sleep. Early the next morning, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Anne's name flashed across the screen. I ignored the calls, forwarding them to voicemail. She had already left a string of messages and texts. Curiosity got the better of me, and I skimmed through them. The first few were casual, asking where I was and mentioning breakfast. Then came worried inquiries about why I had left and where I had gone. By the end, they were filled with anger, demanding that I return to fetch her. The last one threatened that she'd find her own way home, and that I'd regret leaving her behind. Realizing I was fully awake, I got up, showered and dressed. Downstairs, Darcy and John were already up, their expressions guarded. I warned them about the confrontation that was likely to unfold when Anne returned. They laughed it off, but their displeasure with their mother was evident. When the front door slammed open, I knew Anne had arrived. "Where the hell have you been?" she shouted, her voice reverberating through the house. I remained calm, leaning against the counter. "If you're looking for your dignity, I believe you left it in Rick's bed last night," I replied coldly. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson, and for a moment I thought she might faint. But her fury quickly resurfaced. "How could you leave me like that? Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to beg for a ride home? I was going to make things right today, but you've ruined everything." I didn't flinch. "Embarrassment is nothing compared to the humiliation I felt knowing you spent the night with another man. There's no making things right after that. You crossed a line, and there's no going back." Her voice cracked as she protested. "But I told you. I was honest about it." It's not infidelity if I was upfront. I stepped closer, my voice unwavering. Let's settle this once and for all. Did you sleep with someone else last night? Yes, she admitted, her tone defensive. I told you I was going to. And did you allow him to be intimate with you? Of course. Why else would I spend the night with him? Then you cheated, I said firmly. Whether you told me or not is irrelevant. You made a choice, dismissed my objections and betrayed me. End of story. Her eyes filled with tears as she pleaded. If you loved me, you'd let this go. If our love is real, we can get past this. I shook my head, the weight of her words failing to move me. If you truly loved me, and you wouldn't have considered it in the first place. Without another word, I turned and walked to the garage, seeking solace in the familiar hum of my 1969 Chevy Nova. The car had been a long-term project of mine, transformed from a modest 6-cylinder engine with a 3-speed manual transmission into a roaring V8 beast with a 4-speed gearbox. For months and tried to reconcile. She sneaked into my room at night, attempted heartfelt conversations, even enlisted the children's help to sway me. It all backfired. Darcy, ever blunt, confronted her. Mom, Dad's never said a bad word about you to us, she declared. But you've criticized him plenty. Don't blame him for how we feel. That's on you. Anne's desperation escalated. One evening, she appeared in the doorway, wearing a silky black nightgown that clung to her figure. Michael, she whispered, her voice trembling, I can't do this anymore. I need you. Please, come to bed with me. I met her gaze, my expression unyielding. Why don't you call Rick instead? Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't have a lover, Michael. I haven't been with anyone since that night. I want you. Please don't push me away. Her words might have swayed another man. But for me, the image of her with someone else, of colleagues whispering behind my back, was enough to extinguish any desire. Betrayal had eclipsed every other emotion. A week later, on a quiet Saturday night, I knew the end was near. Sitting in the living room with a glass of scotch and soda, I was engrossed in a well-worn novel when Anne appeared at the foot of the stairs. She was dressed to perfection, tight jeans that hugged her figure, high heels that accentuated her posture, and jewelry that caught the dim light. It was a look that transported me back to the parties we used to attend together. Her eyes locked on mine, pleading. Michael, I need you, she said softly, her voice trembling with a mix of desperation and resolve. Please come upstairs and join me. If you refuse, I'll find someone who will. I set the book down deliberately, taking a moment to compose myself before looking up at her. You look stunning, Anne. Truly. And I'm sure you won't have any trouble finding someone to spend the night with. But if you do, keep in mind that it will be an open marriage. If you sleep with someone else, I'll consider us both free to see other people. That's not what I want, she burst out, her voice rising in frustration. I want you. I'm standing here, offering myself to you. And all you do is push me away. Why? If you don't want me anymore, just say so. Do you want a divorce? No, I replied evenly, my tone calm but firm. What I want is the woman I married. The one who loved me, who was faithful to me. That woman is gone. You broke my trust that night, and I don't know how to get it back. Tears filled her eyes as she clutched at the railing, her voice breaking. I vowed to be faithful. I made a mistake, but I'll never hurt you again. Doesn't that mean anything? I shook my head slowly. Words mean nothing after what you've done. Actions matter. And your actions have spoken loud and clear. Her tears spilled over as she choked out. How long will you punish me? What can I do to fix this? I exhaled, the weight of everything pressing down on me. There's nothing you can do, Anne. It's already broken. My focus now is on the kids. Once John graduates, we'll go our separate ways. Until then, we're just housemates. Her face crumpled, devastated. If that's the case, I'll file for divorce myself. You're welcome to, I said quietly. But remember, the kids are old enough to decide where they want to live, and I'm confident they'll choose me. She stared at me for a long moment before walking away, the sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor echoing in the silence. The decision had been made. Trust once shattered could not be rebuilt. No apology or promise could undo the damage that had been done. The months that followed brought a new, unconventional arrangement. For the sake of the children, We remained under the same roof, but lived entirely separate lives. Dating other people was permitted, as long as we kept it discreet, and never brought anyone home. And true to form, embraced the arrangement. She dressed meticulously for evenings out, her makeup flawless, her perfume lingering in the air. I, too, began to navigate the unfamiliar world of dating, meeting women at work and cautiously dipping my toes into relationships. Outwardly, we maintained the appearance of a family. Social commitments required us to attend gatherings together, smiling politely for photos, and exchanging pleasantries. But it didn't take long for those around us to piece together the truth. Occasionally, and attempted to rekindle our spark. To my shame, I sometimes gave in. She remained as beautiful as ever, and after a few drinks, my resolve occasionally faltered. But even then, it was purely physical, devoid of the emotional connection we once shared. 3 years passed, and the inevitable finally arrived. John had moved into his college dorm, and Darcy was preparing for her first year of university. The house was sold, and we were both packing up the remnants of our shared life. Our divorce was nearly finalized, awaiting only the judge's signature. As we boxed up souvenirs of our years together, and spoke softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "I still love you, you know." "I know," I replied, equally somber. "I'm sorry," she murmured, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Me too." She hesitated before asking, "Will you stay in touch?" "No pressure. Just don't disappear completely." Though the love we once shared was gone, replaced by something quieter and more distant, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. In many ways, she had become a friend. We would always be connected through our children, and her charm, undeniable as ever, softened the edges of my resentment. "Of course," I said. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, and grandchildren ensured our paths would continue to cross. The children forgave her in time, though their relationship with her was never quite the same. She bought a modest apartment for their visits, while I moved into a small house with enough land for a workshop. 5 years after our divorce, and invited me to lunch. Her demeanor was nervous, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "I have a favor to ask," she began, her voice tentative. "I understand if you say no, but please just hear me out." "Go ahead," I said, curious. She took a deep breath. "Andrew proposed." I said yes. "Good for you," I said. "Do you love him?" "Yes," she admitted. "I'll never fully forget us, but I've made peace with the past. Andrew makes me happy. I'm ready to move forward." "So what's the favor?" I asked. "If you're looking for my blessing, you already have it." She hesitated, then spoke. "I want you to walk me down the aisle." The request stunned me. "What?" "I want you to give me away," she repeated. Most ex-wives wouldn't dream of inviting their former husbands to their wedding, let alone asking them to play such a significant role. But her reasoning was unexpectedly heartfelt. "You were the most important man in my life, aside from my father, who isn't here anymore," she explained. "You were my last great love." This gesture would symbolize passing that chapter of my life to Andrew. It would show everyone that we've moved forward as friends. Her logic, unconventional as it was, struck a chord. After consulting with Andrew, our children, and my own conscience, I agreed. The wedding was unorthodox but deeply meaningful. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman away?" I responded, "Her family and her ex-husband." At the reception, I watched Anne and Andrew dance, a sense of closure settling over me. Our story had come to an end, but its legacy would live on in the threads of our shared past.